You're live.
Oh, we're live. Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, if you've joined me. My name is Jnanavaca. For those of you who don't know me, welcome. Very, very warm welcome. I hope you're all doing well. And I'm well myself. It's a weird transition time, isn't it? This coming out of lockdown. I hope you're adjusting as best you can. We're starting to adjust here at the centre. We've got, don't know if you're aware, but we've had 2 live, as it were, in-person classes now. One last Thursday, and then we had a sub-25 class last Friday. And so if you want to book, do book, and you can come in person if you can. Of course, if you're in New York, you can't come over just for the class, but we can take up to 16 people, which is not a lot compared to what we normally have, but it's not to be sniffed at. So yeah, if you want a live experience, me or somebody else teaching at the London Buddhist Centre. Last week we had somebody who'd never been here before, and that was just lovely, really lovely. Who have we got, Alexandra? So I've got Alexandra and I've got Ariane supporting, doing the tech stuff. Who have we got?
So we have got 28 people with us so far.
Hello, 28 people.
We have Mia Chingen from Sabac.
Hello.
We have Kevin from Lay-on-Sea.
Hello there.
From Dorking.
Hello there, Kevin and Alison.
From
Hello, Harvey, tall Harvey.
We have Maggie from Stoke Newington.
Maggie, hello.
We have Chiara from Italy.
Hello, Chiara from Italy.
We have Sam from Cairns.
Sam from Cairns.
Sophia from Hackney.
Local. Hello, Sophia.
We have Gail in the Barbican.
Gail in the Barbican.
We have Nina from New York.
Hey, hello, Nina. That's great.
Vanna from Portugal.
Oh, from Portugal, Vanna. That's great.
From Belgrade.
From Belgrade. That's very good. All right, we're going to have to. I can't go through. We're going to have to go live. I mean, we are live, I know, but I'm going to have to officially start. So, a formal welcome to all of you. Very, very good that you're joining me. And tonight, my name's Jnanavaca. Tonight, it will be Satyadasa who will miraculously appear on this seat in a wee while, who will be talking. And we decided that these 4 Mondays, they're a bit different. We're looking at when you become ordained in the Triratna Buddhist order, if you become ordained, because it's not an inevitability, it's not that you'll suddenly find yourself with a funny name and a case around your neck. But if you become ordained in the Triratna Buddhist order, in the ordination ceremony, part of it, you take vows. And there are certain, there's a set of 4 vows that you take, and they essentialize what it is to make a commitment to the Dharma, to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. They essentialize that in just a very few words. And so, excuse me, over the last couple of weeks and the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at those 4 vows. So we've already had, what have we had? In harmony with friends and companions, I accept this ordination. So ordination as something that connects you to the whole Sangha. It's not, once you're ordained, you're part of a network and you're not just a lone individual. We've had, with loyalty to my teachers, I accept this ordination. So the principle of receptivity to people who are more experienced than ourselves on the path is sort of encapsulated in this phrase, with loyalty to my teachers, I accept this ordination. And then tonight, Satyadasa is going to be talking about, for the attainment of enlightenment, I accept this ordination. That's probably not how it's billed on the YouTube advert. I can't remember what the something about the ending of suffering. Anyway, but the vow is for the attainment of enlightenment. I accept this ordination. So Satyadasa is going to be exploring what on earth does that mean? What does it mean to dedicate oneself for the attainment of enlightenment. And then next week, Suryagupta is going to be looking at for the benefit of all beings, I accept this ordination, because, well, committing yourself to the three jewels means committing yourself to acting in order to try and alleviate suffering everywhere, to try and be a force for good in the world. That's what our order is committed to. So for the benefit of all beings, I accept this ordination. So very, very lofty, inspiring vows that one takes at the time of ordination. And even if you aren't thinking about ordination, don't want to be ordained, these vows have relevance to anybody practicing Buddhism, because they, as I say, they encapsulate the ideal for us as practitioners. Anyway, so very glad that you can join us, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Satyadasa has to say. I'm saying that because he's sitting off camera over there, suitably distant from me, and then at some point he'll sit where I'm sitting. And yeah, I'm grateful to Alexandra and Ariane for being our tech crew tonight. They live together, so they can work together, but they're distant from, so there's just 4 of us in the shrine room at the moment. Okay, so why don't we do a little bit of meditation? So it's good to, in a way, prepare to listen to the Dharma, and I think meditation before a Dharma talk is partly helping us to just arrive into our bodies and into our experience so that we can become receptive to hear what Satyadasa has to say. So if you'd like to make yourselves comfortable as you can on your sofa or a chair or maybe your meditation gear, and I'll just talk us through a short meditation. For about 15 minutes or so. So when you feel that you're comfortable on your seat, just beginning by becoming aware of the sounds around you. Hopefully you can hear me, my voice, but there might be other sounds in the place in which you're sitting that you can hear. If you acknowledge the sounds as sounds, just as sense input, sensations for the ear, they don't have to disturb your meditation. You can just let them be there. So broadening your awareness to include everything you can hear. And then taking a couple of deeper breaths and noticing how that feels in your body. Bringing your awareness into the body. First of all, just noticing the overall shape your body makes. You want to be comfortable and relaxed. And also you want to be upright and alert. And then becoming aware of the sensations of contact the body makes with the chair or cushions or seat under you, and also with the ground. And imagining the weight of the body falling through those points of contact into the ground, rooting you to the earth, the weight falling down deeper and deeper into the earth. And becoming aware of your legs and feet and sensations you can feel in the legs and feet. Trying to have a direct experience of those sensations. Not an idea of your legs or your feet, but a direct experience of whatever you can feel. Perhaps a sense of pressure and contact with the earth. Maybe the touch of clothing. A sense of warmth or coolness. And also perhaps some inner sensations. A sense of the energy in the legs and the feet. And imagining the legs becoming soft and heavy, letting go of any tension in the muscles in the legs. Letting go of the legs. Becoming aware of the upper body, the spine rising up from the tailbone, from the pelvis, rising up in its natural curves. Lifting the upper body. And see if you can have a sense of the head being balanced on top of the spine. You want you to rock the head backwards and forwards a little bit to find the point of balance so that the crown is uppermost. And imagining a slight lift from the crown of the head. And softening the face. Letting the eyes become soft. The muscles around the eyes can soften. And also around the mouth and the jaw. And becoming aware of the shoulders. Seeing if you can let the shoulders fall away a little bit more down the sides of the body. And then noticing the hands and the sensations you can feel in the fingers and palms and backs of your hands. Letting the hands become heavy and soft and open. And the belly. Noticing any sensations in and around the belly. If there's tightness in the stomach, just bringing a gentle, kindly awareness to encourage a softening of the belly. And then having an overall sense again of the body, broadening your awareness to include the whole of the body and its sensations, and also a sense of how you feel in yourself, your general mood. Any emotions that are present, a sense of your heart center. You're just noticing without judgment, taking in information as to how you are. And then broadening your awareness further, becoming aware of your environment, the room that you're sitting in, sounds around you, and also an imaginative sense of everyone who's tuned in, all of us sitting together, wherever we are in the world. When you feel ready, coming out of the meditation and opening your eyes. Very good. Okay, very good. So I'm going to hand over now to Satyadasa, who will talk to us about the Dharma, and we'll have a break, a 5-minute break, and then both of us will come back for some questions in the second bit of the class. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jnanavaca. Good to be with you this evening. My name's Satyadasa, and I've got the rather daunting, at least I feel quite daunted, by the task of talking about the third ordination vow, which, as Jnanavaca said, are really condensations of the Buddhist way, the Buddhist path. They are quintessentially Buddhist for anyone who's interested in the Dharma. And what more quintessentially is there than enlightenment? So this evening I'm going to talk about the third ordination vow for the attainment of enlightenment. Now I'll begin by acknowledging there's a whole range of responses you might have to the idea of enlightenment. It may be a very familiar idea that is very uplifting to you, and it might be something that's guiding and inspiring in your life. That's one possibility. It may be something that's a bit more, you sort of know that that's what Buddhism says, that the Buddha was enlightened and that's the guiding ideal, but it might feel a bit more distant, a bit more, a bit far away, let's just say. And I think even if you're a practicing Buddhist, and even practicing Buddhists sometimes do feel that enlightenment is quite a distant idea, and possibly don't think about it all that much as a result. So that's another range. And then you might be a bit skeptical. The other possibility is that it could even seem a bit like, well, not only is it a bit distant, it's a bit of a fairy tale. It's a sort of a Buddhist fairy tale or something like that. You could be outright skeptical. It could play no. I suppose at the outside, it could have no meaning to you whatsoever. So there's a whole range of responses that one could have to the notion of enlightenment. Excuse me. And so this evening I'm going to talk about the classical, touch on a classical description of enlightenment, the Buddha's enlightenment. I'm then going to broaden it out to suggest that, how we more broadly imagine the world and ourselves and each other, how we more broadly imagine and conceive of the world, that will affect how we conceive of enlightenment. So that the broader our imagination and our sensibilities and our empathy and our human capacities to imagine and conceive as broadly as possible, that will impact how we then conceive of enlightenment. Yeah. So we don't think of enlightenment as in a sort of a vacuum, as an intellectual thing. It's something that we encounter and that grows. You know, the Buddhist path is a path of growth, and so too with the idea of enlightenment, that will grow. So I'll talk a bit about broadening the imagination and what that might mean, particularly with reference to one of the quite limited views that I would argue our society has shot through, certainly the society as I know it, which is materialism, and how we can limit our scope and our sense of things through materialism. So I'll touch on that. And finally, if there's time, and we'll finish by 8, but if there's time, I'll say something about, well, this whole question of, is it far away? And what do we then what's most important then to discern within our experience? If enlightenment is far away, how do I contact some echo of that within my own experience? And that's the whole area of Shraddha, or faith in Buddhism. Or having that, what is within our experience, can we identify something that is leading us on, giving us the energy and the confidence to tread this path. Yeah. So those are the 3 areas that I'll touch on. But I want to begin with a story about going on pilgrimage to India. I went on a pilgrimage to India a few years ago now, and went with some friends. And the idea was to visit the Buddhist places connected with the life of the Buddha. So the birth of the Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha, the first teaching of the Buddha, and the death of the Buddha, all places in northern India, northeast India. And I called it a pilgrimage, but deep down, I didn't particularly identify with the word pilgrim. I didn't really think of myself as going on a pilgrimage. I was interested. I was certainly excited to be going to India, excited to be going to these sites, but I wasn't particularly thinking I was a pilgrim. I had a book that I've since given away without reading it, called The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. That was written in 16-something. And I never had any intention to read it, so I gave it away. I know the Muslims go on a Hajj, don't they? Every Muslim is enjoined to go on a Hajj once in their lifetime, at least. And Catholics go on pilgrimage to holy places and shrines and things. But that was part of a world that I didn't really identify myself with that kind of world. The first place we arrived at was where the Buddha gave his first teaching. And it's called the Deer Park in Isipatana, which is near modern-day Varanasi. And in my mind, this is a really special place. It's a forest grove. There are deer around. It's in a jungle forest with openings. And the Buddha, who's newly enlightened, meets his friends, his former companions in the quest. And he meets them. And when I arrived at the scene of this place where you go now, it was really not much like in my imagination. It was an archaeological site, really, run by the Government of India Archaeology Department. It was quite impressive. It's quite a large area with some old ruins of temples and a stupa to mark the spot where the Buddha first transmitted this enlightenment, this knowledge, this freedom, this unprecedented new mind that he had discovered. He taught and communicated that for the first time to one of his friends, and it's a very moving scene because that really is the beginning of the Buddhist Sangha. That's the beginning of the Buddhist Sangha when the Buddha, he was so delighted, the Buddha. You'd think not much could make you more happy than being a Buddha, but it did. That moment of realizing it could be communicated to a friend. So that was all in my imagination, but the reality was a bit different. And it was nice, and I was excited to be there, but it wasn't, somehow it was a bit, nothing like, it was on the edge of a modern town, in India. So we went to the museum. There's a museum there where they have all the statues that they've rescued from around the place, and there's lots of them, and they're very beautiful. They speak of a real high culture. They have a lot of beautiful statues. Whenever I go into a museum, I do feel that it's like my blood sugars go down, and I feel a little bit unhappy. It's just a lifelong thing. I never liked museums. So I was responding to the beauty a bit, but I was a bit tired and needing sugar. And I always think, well, what's the fate of these statues? They're all lined up, but they're not where they're supposed to be. They're gonna. What's their fate? Either the jungle is going to grow over the museum and everyone will forget about them, or they'll get destroyed in a cultural war of some kind, which is what usually happens to statues. Or they'll be rehoused in a new Buddhist culture. But it's a long haul for those statues. So, these are the strange thoughts I have, in museums. So then we went on to the Bodh Gaya, which is the place where the Buddha was enlightened. And there was a retreat going on that was led by Subhuti. It was mostly Indian men and women in the order, and a few people from outside, including myself. And lots to say about that. But in the evening, the second evening, we were to walk down towards the Mahabodhi temple, which is, so you can either go by tuk-tuk or you walk down the roads. I walked across the fields. It's a very beautiful walk. And I was really excited at this point, I guess, because I was going to the place, this was the heart of the Buddhist world. And once you're carrying all your meditation klobber, because you have to carry it all in and go through the bomb checks. And it's a bit like Glastonbury. You can easily get separated from your friends there. And so I was going through, and I went through with Subhuti, which was meaningful to me to go through with someone I look up to. And as you go into the Mahabodhi temple, it's a very impressive temple. There's a huge sort of building in the middle, which can't get many people in. It's more of a tall, impressive structure. But most of the temple is what's outside, with trees and plinths and areas to sit. And you're struck by the cacophony of noise from people who visited from all over the Buddhist world, monks, nuns, lay followers, and others, all chanting and circling around, milling about. It's just a wonderful scene. It's very colorful, as you can imagine. And Subhuti went off down somewhere, and I followed round. So I thought, I'm going to go right round the edge so that I can then see the Bodhi tree. So I walked around the edge, and you can all the time see down into the areas of the temple. And when I got there and I stood in front of the Bodhi tree, it was like all of the things I've ever done in my life in terms of Buddhist practice. So I've been, for 25 years, since I was a teenager, interested in reading about Buddhism, coming on retreats and learning meditation and forming friendships with Jnanavaca that's lasted 20 years. And all the inspiring talks I've heard, or all the imaginative things that I've imbibed, and just all of my experiences seemed to come together in that moment, facing the Bodhi tree. And my overwhelming thought was, this is the place. This is the place. Now, of course, I don't know whether it was that place or that other tree over there, but the feeling was, this is the place. And I had to drop all of my rational objections at that point to being a pilgrim. I was a pilgrim. And I felt like I was as much a pilgrim as the Tibetans who were prostrating around me. I felt as much a pilgrim as, well, it was a new feeling to feel a pilgrim. And I the only thing I could do was to sort of bow and actually prostrate towards the Bodhi tree. So that was me confirmed as a pilgrim. So what I want to talk about first is the classical view of enlightenment. So just to give a brief description of the classical view. As you go towards the Bodhi tree, if you go behind it so that you would be facing east, there's the temple right there. But in between, there's a platform, and it's an empty platform, a small empty platform, stone platform, and there's nothing on it. And this symbolizes the fact that ultimately there is no form or concept or way of adequately sort of conceiving and defining enlightenment. There's nothing that it's beyond form. Yeah, it's beyond form. So that's why it's empty. And classical Buddhism does describe the Dharma, the teaching of the Buddha, in terms of an absence very often. So it's said to be an absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. That's what enlightenment is. You could say the delusion is an existence that is founded on self-centeredness of one kind or another, and that greed and hatred, whether that's gross greed and hatred or just subtle forms of wanting and not wanting, that supports and deepens that self-orientation. And they all work together. Delusion, greed, and hatred feed on each other to create. Well, the Buddha said that he ever and again he had taken birth. Ever and again he had taken birth in what he called conditioned existence. So this was after his enlightenment. He said, ever painful is birth, ever and again. It's painful to seek security in that which cannot give security. And conditioned existence, which means everything, cannot give us ultimate security. And he again experienced and he had knowledge, according to the traditional accounts, of his births and his attempts to take a foothold in conditioned existence. And that's what causes suffering. You know, the greed, hatred, and delusion that underpins this attempt to find security and safety in a condition that is final and fixed for us, where we can just rest and everything will be okay. This is the delusion that really causes us suffering. So with the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion comes the cessation of suffering. So tonight's talk was called Towards the End of Suffering, or something like that. So enlightenment is the end of suffering in Buddhism. So it's not a small thing, the end of suffering, discovering the end of suffering. It's discovering enlightenment. It's the same thing. So that was the culmination of the Buddha's quest. And what that is the arising of wisdom, and the outward manifestation of that is compassion. But I think what I want to say is, that's a very, very short description of enlightenment, and maybe it resonates with us, this idea of an absence. Maybe it does create some sense of what we can imagine, but where does it leave us? Where does it really leave us? So, it might leave us with a sense of nothing or not much. It might leave us with a sense of, well, if it's gone beyond this ordinary sense of self, if we've gone beyond, almost the common sense experience of life, where does that actually leave us? So rather than me try to describe enlightenment and fall into a kind of philosophical abyss, trying to describe the ins and outs of enlightenment, what I thought I'd do in this talk is just suggest that, how we conceive the world and how we imagine the world is going to fundamentally shape how we conceive of what enlightenment is. And if we have a narrow view of ourselves, other people, the world, things, life, then that's going to lead to a narrow conception of enlightenment. If we can have a broader view of life, and if we can enrich our view of life and our imagination and how we see things and the views that we hold, then that will lead to a deeper, richer view of enlightenment. Yeah? So in a way, it's our imagination which renders the world to us. And this is not obvious. I mean, a lot of the time, I think it's probably quite an ingrained idea that we basically see the world as it is. We really basically know what's going on. Maybe there's some things we admit that we don't know about, but they're all sort of contained within an overall sense that we do know what's going on. We do have the sort of, we've got it down basically. So yes, so the movement of broadening our imagination is obviously a very long one. It's really my experience is through Buddhism, but not just through Buddhism, through art, through nature, through meditation, through the whole endeavor of the spiritual life. I have, in my experience, has been one of broadening away from a view of the world which is heavily affected by materialism. So I want to talk about what materialism is. So what is materialism? I think materialism is the belief that what is really real is matter. Yeah. So what is really real is matter. So when I was facing the Bodhi tree, when I was looking at the Bodhi tree, if I'd have been, if it had been hard-hearted, I might have said, "Hey, Satyadasa, but what's really real? Come on, it's a lovely tree, the Bodhi tree. It's got beautiful spreading limbs. It's a beautiful tree. It's really nice, but all of that stuff that you're talking, all of that sort of intuitions and feelings and imagining and uplift and reverence and all of that in your mind that's going on, that's not really real. Look what's really there. What's really there is a tree. Really, come on. What's really there? It's a tree, isn't it? I wasn't listening to that voice at that time, but that voice has been a dominant part of my experience in many ways. So that would be what's really there, what's really real, and what's true as well. What that's saying is, that's materialism is not only saying what's really real is matter, but that's what is true as well. What we can say about the world in an objective sense is true. And the methodology behind that, and it's not just scientists who do this, it's all of us who do this, because we're all been trained in that through our schooling, and it's been going on for centuries now, is to say that if you want to know what's real, you have to cut out the human. You have to cut out the observer, not the human, literally. You have to remove all of those things that I've just talked about when I was facing the Bodhi tree. They're not really, they're nice. They're sort of, it's good to have a good imagination. It's good to have feelings and senses, and it's good, but it's not really real. It's not really true. So the scientific methodology is all about that. So just cutting out, so that we have a pure observation of what's going on. So why raise this? What's the problem with that? What is the problem with that? Well, I've hinted at it. I think that the problem with it is that it denigrates all the other ways that we can know and sense and empathize and connect with the world. It'd be interesting to know whether you agree with this. It's so fundamental, I think, materialism, that probably most of the time we don't notice. We certainly don't go around thinking, I'm a materialist. I mean, very few people think that. And by the way, I'm not talking about the tendency to go out shopping and buy stuff, that kind of materialism, to fill the emotional void or whatever. That is a consequence of materialism in some ways. But here I'm really talking about how we see the world. And I'm not talking about the sense-based experience, that we all have sense-based experience. The Buddha would have had sense-based experience. But we've come to have a view that what's really real, and what that means is that, we investigate matter, and matter has been investigated, and what's underneath that is particles of some kind or another. So when you look at a tree, it's made up of cells, or it's made up of woody cells, and there's air coming in through the leaves and gases exchanging. and we know that. But of course, materialism has been really heavily undermined by the new physics. The new physics that's been going on for 100 years, and it's not new anymore, really. And the new physics says that the common sense version of what's underlying things, so you go through cells or atoms and subatomic particles and things, but what's really there is indescribable. It's beyond any real capacity to put it in common sense terms. It's not even that there is matter there. It's not even true to say that there's matter there. The extraordinary discoveries are, beyond me to describe, but even whether something exists and where it exists is dependent to some degree on the perceiver. And there's experiments that have demonstrated this. And that might sound really nice, and that's sort of an academic point. And in a way, all of that new physics has not been incorporated in our common, our understanding of the world and in science. It's really sitting in a funny place. It's strangely unrelated to ordinary science, because ordinary science proceeds on the basis of objects and conceiving of them as being there, and it works, doesn't it? It gives us some amazing results. So we don't question it too much. So that's matter. And if we were to broaden away from that, we would be able to give more importance to cultivating sensitivity and empathy and imagination, and really recognize that the Buddhist perspective is that the mind is foremost. The mind is the forerunner of all things. The mind is the most important thing. And that even when we're doing our science and we're being objective, we're using our minds. We are imagining what matter is. We're conceiving of atoms and cells. It's not really real in the sense that we sort of assume it is real. It is all an act of imagination. And that's obviously quite a radical perspective. But the Buddhist emphasis on the mind really encourages us. So if truth is to be found, if truth is to be discovered, it's going to be discovered through the mind. Yeah. And the more we can, so with nature, for example, and we could say it's just a tree, and we can analyze that in matter, or we can open to the beauty of a tree. And there's science now is starting to become more holistic, isn't it? We're starting to have nature books about, nature writing, relating trees to the wholes. And there's that book, The Secret Life of Trees, that relates, talks about the way trees communicate with other trees, or the way that trees are sensitive to their environment in various ways. And then we might also be open to the tree, not just as wonderful and interconnected, but also a thing of beauty. Nature can be perceived as beautiful. And when beauty comes in, we're getting a sense of more of the sacred element. It's not just to do with matter. Neither is it to do with the wonderful descriptions that science gives us about the evolution of matter. Like, if you just take something as simple as a grasshopper, and the trajectory or the journey through deep time is miraculous. It's miraculous, and it's described by science. But the actual perception of a grasshopper or a tree or anything can be filled with more of the mind of an artist, more of the mind of that, the sacred. Yeah, and that's another way of perceiving. And what we're saying here is not that as we go from the objective, we go to the merely subjective. So an objection to what I'm saying could be that actually, are you saying that anything that goes through your mind is the truth? Are you saying that whatever I think about, that's what truth is? That's not it either. The Buddhist position is much more intricate than that. It's much more intersubjective and ultimately reaching beyond subject and object. It doesn't really fit into that polarity. So yeah, it's not that just validating any whimsical thought that goes through my mind doesn't automatically have the value of truth. Truth is a hard thing to think about. And what Bhante Sangharakshita said with reference to the universe was that unless we can conceive of the universe as basically alive, we can't really begin to have a spiritual life. A spiritual life rests not on a universe conceived of as dead matter extending out into space, but as something that is a continuum of consciousness. And that does not mean that we're necessarily going to revert to some pagan worldview where, or rather our vision of a pagan worldview, which is not necessarily a pagan worldview, where tree spirits are going to jump out at us and give us wise words or anything like that. It means something much deeper than that, which is, I'm not going to try to describe it, but it's the sensitizing, and then that can happen through Buddhist practice and through all sorts of other, chiefly I've discovered that through Buddhist practice that is possible. There's much more than I really know about on heaven and earth, as they say. So that's something about nature, and we can reduce people as well. So sometimes people get reduced. So if we were being materialistic with regards to people, we would reduce ourselves to biology or the activity of genes or the activity of neuroscience. And maybe nobody actually does this in the fullest sense and says you are just biology or just we all have longings and we all have more than that. But it was noticeable, I think, that when neuroscience started to say, well, meditation works because it changes the structure of the brain. It allows for this regeneration of neurons in the brain, neuroplasticity. That did validate for a lot of people, it really is real because it can be said to exist. It's something really is happening here. So it's really real. And of course, that's true. You know, there's bound to be a physical, observable thing going on for everything that we think and everything that we do. That is probably right. But it's the reduction. There's been an attempt to reduce human life to a description of chemistry or neurons, and it's a very bizarre thing to try to do because that's what reductionism is. It's trying to say that human sense of goodness, truth, beauty, kindness, or whatever can be finally reduced to a description of matter in terms of chemistry or some such thing. And that's a strange idea, but we've been wrestling with that idea in our culture for a long time. Or you might reduce people in terms of culture or race or nation. So you might sort of define people overly in that way. And that's another way of limiting people. Or you might say we're just sort of psychological conditioning. What happened to us in childhood is the foremost thing, and we might reduce each other in that way a little bit. And also with people more broadly, of course, you can't really conceive of a person absent of conceiving of the whole universe, actually, and the meaning of everything, because humans fit into that picture. So if you had a view that we are fallen from a state of paradise, and we're in sin and then working our way up back to the grace of God, that's one version. That's going to mean that people are one thing. If you take the more existentialist position that we're sort of a brief spark of consciousness, not even sure what consciousness is, it's really just, how do we explain that anyway? But we're in a sea of meaningless time and we just have to cope with existence. So that's going to color the way that you see. But if you see us as a brief spark of consciousness, which then goes out, the deep ecological perspective might be more that we are part of the evolution of the entire cosmos, and we are the cosmos becoming aware of itself, and our human body and our eyes are the earth becoming aware of itself. I find that a beautiful vision. Maybe that's a little bit closer to sort of a Buddhist notion. But the Buddha didn't say what the universe is. He was not concerned with saying where things came from or where they're going or all the ins and outs of the metaphysics of things. His observation was that life is an opportunity for awakening. So life is said to be a precious opportunity. We're endowed with all the capacities to awaken. And that's another version of life, and that's going to affect how we see people. So what I'm really suggesting is that there's many ways, and can we explore our views? Can we explore how we imagine life? This is a huge thing to undertake because it is challenging. It does mean that we'll be challenging our conditioning, and that way can open up jewels. That's what will open up riches to us if we can see the way that we limit ourselves. So with other people, for example, is there space to allow a person to be, in a sense, a bit beyond us, to not have to? Can we leave space for others in our conception of them? I've known Jnanavaca for 20 years. I know a lot about Jnanavaca, and I enjoy hearing about Jnanavaca's life. It's a wonderful life to hear about. And no doubt I'll learn more as time goes by. But one of the things I've allowed for is that I don't really know Jnanavaca in a sense. Essentially, he's very good at carrying this because he's a man of depth and mystery. So, and do I know myself? Can we, if we leave space for other people, maybe we can leave space for ourselves in our imagination of ourselves. The times when I felt least happy is when I've been overly defined about myself and sort of boxing myself in by thinking that I know all about what I am and where I'm going. And we do this with other people. And through metta practice, of course, this is the direct extension of empathy to others, their joys and sufferings, but also them on the path to awakening. You are imagining in metta practice all beings as capable of awakening, for example. So there's a very broad range of what we can do with our imagination. So I want to say a couple of things, and maybe we'll have more time to look at this when we do our questions and answers, but just to touch on the area of faith. So within a broader imagination, something is ignited in us. So this may well have happened to you. You've read about the Buddha or the Dharma, you've been on a retreat, you've started to meditate, and something is ignited. Wherever we're at, something is ignited. And Bhante Sangharakshita, my teacher and the founder of this order, says that Shraddha is what is the Buddhist term, the term for faith. Some people are uneasy with faith, so they say it's confidence or trust, and those are good words as well. He says it's that which is deepest in us resonating with that which is deepest in the universe, which is a beautiful way. That which is deepest in us resonates with what's deepest in the universe. And that carries the two ideas about developing, something within us that is part of us already, so that we can know, we can discern there's something within us. And there's something in the universe. So there's something outside of us that's calling us or that we're moving towards to. And there's a resonance, and the connection between them is this resonance. And that's a very beautiful way of putting it, I think, because it captures that. With confidence and trust, it's not that we know. It's not that we absolutely got cast iron certainty about what enlightenment is. But it's something intuitive. It's not just emotional, although it is the emotion to practice. It's something a bit more. It contains a grain of truth, and it's not just it's not just to do with my experience and what I know already. It is something that's leading beyond myself as well, and it also contains a sense of longing. There's so much to say, but when we practice Dharma, we listen to the teachings and we reflect on them. We test them against our own experience, and then we meditate and we deepen our understanding of them. And this deepens this. So faith is not a given in Buddhism. It's not a sort of an absolute thing. It also develops. It also is something that can grow. And of course, there are times when it's difficult and we lose touch with that. And everything that I've said is not some straightforward ascent of the imagination to the great heights of enlightenment. Of course, life involves difficulty. Of course, life involves periods of confusion and not knowing and feeling disconnected. But there you are. So what have I said? I've said the classical view of enlightenment is this absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. And then I've said, well, how do we conceive of how are we going to conceive in the most broad way possible of enlightenment, so that we can really, so how are we going to conceive of the world and other people and nature, so that we can have the richest and most sensitive, empathetic and imaginative and uplifted kind of mind, the kind of mind which will be a vehicle to receive whatever we want to call the truth, because that's a big word. But that is the Buddhist perspective, is that you enrich and you enliven the mind, and it's through the mind that you know the truth. And everything that we know from objective science is a wonderful achievement that can be used and celebrated. It's a big subject, but I want to end, because we're running out of time, by just touching on how we conceive of the Buddha. Because we could conceive of the Buddha as something quite narrow, as just a man who was calm and serene, or something like that. That would be the culturally conditioned view of what Buddha is, really. That's sort of the archetypal image in a way. Or we could say it's somebody who's very mindful, very present, not dwelling in the past and the future. That might be an inspiring ideal of the Buddha. But when we imagine the Buddha, so when I was to go back to facing the Bodhi tree, I was not conceiving of myself attaining enlightenment and sitting on that spot where the Buddha was sitting. And I wasn't thinking, it's going to be me next on that spot. To conceive of the Buddha is to conceive of a transcendent ideal. Yeah? And that is an enormous thing. And it's not as simple as saying, I'm going to attain enlightenment. Yeah? It means we have to imagine something that is beyond that, an image that is beyond any kind of easily sum-upable conceptualization in the 1 minute that I have remaining from this talk. That's for sure. But I want to end with some words from Subhuti, who was on that first retreat, that retreat that I did. And he really sums up the depth of this question quite well. He says, there is a deeper issue, going to the heart of what it is to lead the Dharma life. Unless we can truly imagine the Buddha and his enlightenment in a way that stirs us deeply, we cannot mobilize our energies to go for refuge to him. We can only imagine the Buddha wholeheartedly by discovering his image in our own minds, inspired and supported by the images around us. Images of this kind cannot be ordered or devised. They must live and grow, and like plants, they must emerge from their own natural environments, the psyches of individuals in which they appear, and the cultures in which those psyches have developed. Broken and debased images cannot easily be exchanged for images from alien cultures, however genuine, powerful, and effective they may be in their own contexts. Buddhists today, especially those from outside the old Buddhist world, have embarked on a long and difficult journey to discover the image of the Buddha within themselves and to allow that image a natural expression in their own cultures. This work is more akin to magic than science. So there ends my quick tour of enlightenment or something like that. So we're going to have a short break where we'll set up. It'll be a few minutes, and at say 5 past, we'll begin again. And if you have some questions, do tap them into the chat box. Okay.
Okay, so we're back.
Hello, are we back? We're back?
We're back.
So we're now, both of us here. And I just want to say thank you very, very much, Satyadasa, for a wonderful talk, excellent talk. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I thought it was great. And yeah, if you do have questions, Alexandra's going to sort of read them out, and then, I don't know, we'll just give it a go. We've got about 20 minutes. If you don't have questions, Satyadasa will carry on talking, I think. We can carry on sitting listening. So does anybody have a question?
Yes. So we have a question from Oliver, which is enlightenment an experience that can only be understood through experiencing it, rather than a thing that we can describe?
So I'll maybe repeat the question just in case he didn't pick it up on the mic. So Oliver, hi, has asked, is enlightenment an experience that we can only really know by having the experience for ourselves, rather than a thing that we can, I don't know and describe in the abstract? That's roughly the question, isn't it, Oliver? Good question.
No, no, please.
That's me now, is it? No, I think you're right. It is something that we have to experience for ourselves. And there's all sorts of paradoxes there, because part of the enlightenment experience is said to be when we recognize that what we normally think of as self is a construct. And when we recognize that really, really deeply, it's said that the construct sort of falls away. Our construction of me falls away. So, and then something else opens up. And you could say it's an experience that opens up, but paradoxically, there's no longer a me to have the experience. Normally, when we think of the word experience, I have experiences. I go to Spain, or I go to the cinema, except you don't at the moment. But you know what I mean? We have ice cream, I do anyway, and that's an experience. But enlightenment sort of is pushing, actually it's gone pushed beyond ordinary language, so even the word experience doesn't quite apply, because what's happened is that we've seen through the delusion of this fixed and separate thing called me, or the construct called me. But certainly it's not something that we can abstractly talk about. And yeah, I thought, Satyadasa, you were really making a good point that we have to imagine it. We have to imagine it in order to want to move towards it. So there's also another paradox there.
Yeah, I think I'd say that it has to be alive in our life in some way. The notion of enlightenment. I mean, that is an act of imagination. And if it's just about thinking about it, it will so quickly become a dead letter. If it's not within the path of growth, within the path of a growing sense and imagining it, and within the whole practice of Dharma, bringing it alive, we have to bring it alive within us, don't we?
I think there's, as part of that path, it's also worth saying that we do have to study what enlightenment is, what the Buddha taught, and what his notion of the goal is, because as you were sort of also indicating, there's lots of wrong ways of conceiving of enlightenment, or limiting ways that don't do it justice. So it's not that we give up on our thinking capacity on the path. We use our reason, but ultimately we're also aware that the experience will transcend our reason. Yeah, good question, Oliver. That goes to, there's a lot to say in there. Yeah.
Thank you. So earlier in your talk, you mentioned this notion of emptiness, and Mircea is asking, is emptiness our true nature?
Okay, so it's Mir, is it?
Mircea.
Mircea. Hi there, Mircea. So is emptiness our true nature? Satyadasa had talked a little bit, mentioned anyway, emptiness. Is emptiness our true nature? Satyadasa. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, Mircea was asking you.
Yes, that's true. I can't get out of it now. I think, you can talk about it. the seat, I was saying that the seat was empty, so it was empty of greed, hatred, and delusion. The Buddha's experience didn't contain that. So it was empty of those things. That's one way of talking about emptiness. And then there's another way of talking in the Buddhist tradition that talks about the emptiness of all things. The emptiness of self, the emptiness of other, the emptiness of world, the emptiness of ideas, and the ungraspability of everything, ultimately. And it's so lovely to have Jnanavaca here because he's an expert on emptiness.
I talk about it anyway. I can talk a little bit about it. Thanks for that. I think you're right, that it is the emptiness. Emptiness is a bit of an odd word. I mean, it is a literal translation of shunyata. And so I guess we use it. But it gives the wrong idea in English. Emptiness, I think, leads too much towards the sense that there's nothing, that there's really nothing there. And that's not true. It's just that what is there is ungraspable. It's extremely positive, but ungraspable. The magic that you ended with, the Subhuti's words about magic, it's more like magic than science. We're more like magic than science. Everything. One teaching says that this phenomenal world, including what I think of as me, is like a magic show. It's like a magical illusion. Somehow everything appears to arise, and yet when you look closely, there's no substance there that can be grasped. A bit like those atoms and those particles. Everything's arisen, made of atoms and particles. When we look closely, they don't seem to be there, and yet something's happening. So it's said that when greed and hatred and delusion are transcended, it's not a nothing that arises. Whatever arises, the mind that arises, the enlightened mind, is full. It's full. Fullness would be a better word than emptiness, but it's full of qualities like love and equanimity and the most profound peace and limitless freedom and fearlessness and untrammeled energy and boundless love and wisdom, a clear seeing, a clear knowing. All of that is said to arise. So when we use the word emptiness, we're indicating a state that's full of all of that, beyond conception. Yeah. So you could say it's magic, it's a mystery, but not in a silly kind of mystery mongering way. There's something very, very true there. And yes, you could say that that's who we really are. And it's deeper, more ultimate than anything that we think we are. Yeah. Thank you, Mircea.
Thank you. We have a question from Kevin.
Hello, Kevin.
I was asking, is science, so science and religion used to be seen as polar opposites.
Ah, yes.
Do you think that recent scientific discoveries are bringing them in closer harmony?
Yeah, interesting question, Kevin. So Kevin's saying, used to be seen that science and religion were polar opposites. And do we think that recent scientific discoveries are bringing the two, science and religion, into closer harmony?
Yeah. And this is a great, topic. And I feel like I've grown up in an era where there's been endless debates about science and religion. And as you say, Kevin, they do seem to always be sort of polarized in a rather thoughtless way, actually, a lot of the time, without really unpacking what we mean by either term. I think that there are indications that the old, the mechanistic view of science, it isn't working, and it isn't working theoretically, and it isn't working practically. It's actually starting to destroy the planet, for example. That mindset doesn't quite serve us anymore. And that for the last 50 years or more, starting with, say, ecological science, more whole thinking sort of seeing things, the part as part of a whole and the whole as part of another bigger whole. That has emerged into science in various ways. And, like the genetic science, for example. So it used to be that genes are what determines everything. But now we know genetic science is about the interaction of genes with the environment, and the environment is everything else. So doors and windows are being opened up for conceiving science in a broader way. And there are many scientists who work within paradigms which are not sort of objective science versus myth-mongering nonsense. So yes, I think there is a lot, but it's a big challenge that we have as to how to, that kind of science, in my view, more holistic science. It's a funny word, holistic, but it seems to mean not really science, but for me, it is real science. That's what it's more scientific in a way. So yes, it's a challenge. It's a challenge that I think there are scientists working on exactly that.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I'd also say it depends what you mean by religion as well. Buddhism is, well, it's a non-theistic religion, if it's a religion at all. I think it is a religion. I like the word religion in a sense, but it's not quite like theism. In fact, it's quite different to theism. And so Einstein had this kind of, perhaps it's simplistic and perhaps it's no longer quite right. But anyway, he defined religion into 3 categories, which I find interesting. Are you familiar with those? He talks about the religion that's based on fear. So he says that early human religions, early human beings were, ignorant of science, I guess, and thunderstorms and the natural world was full of awe, but also a place of fear and danger. And so you propitiated the gods of the thunder and of the sun and the wind and the rain, and you propitiated them so that they would serve you or not destroy you. So there's religion that's based on fear. He then talks about religion that is based on social conventions in order to bind societies and cultures together. You can call it sort of religion that's trying to develop civilization or society. And so those sorts of religions are very preoccupied with conventional rules. Sometimes they're ethical rules, sometimes they're a bit dubious as to whether they're really ethical, but they're rules that say, obey this rule and we'll all live together. I don't know, obey the Sabbath, for example, or whatever. Holy days and feast days. So that keeps society together. And then he says there's a 3rd type of religion, which he calls cosmic religion, which is religion that's trying to align itself with truth, which is in a way beyond social mores. It's beyond just fear. It's trying to open ourselves up to the mystery of the universe. And he says that is aligned with true science as well, which is also trying to realize what the cosmos is and who we are in our place. And interestingly, he says that all religions have all 3 components. Do you see what I mean? The fear, the social, and this cosmic. But he says that Buddhism, more than any other religion, is a cosmic religion. It's true exploration, if you see what I mean, beyond social mores and beyond just the religion of fear. So I think Buddhism particularly, and science as it's done purely, I mean, I mainly know a little bit about physics rather than the other sciences. I think there is some crossover. Yeah, their quest for truth. Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Why would you discount the human mind and human experience from your quest for truth?
Yeah, why?
Why would you do that?
We're part of whatever's going on.
There's no reason to do that.
No.
It can be included, and science is the pursuit of truth must ultimately include every phenomenon that arises, and those phenomena arise primarily in the mind, don't they?
And it's interesting. I mean, in physics, quantum physics. Physics is, I guess, primarily starting from the assumption, that materialist assumption, And if we look at matter in the most detailed way, we'll get at truth. And what it found in quantum physics was that the ultimate constituents of matter don't seem to exist independently of mind or of observation. So object and subject, at least that's one interpretation of quantum physics. I know it's not everybody's interpretation, but that is saying that this division of object and subject is sort of not real. Buddhism's saying, it started from the other pole and says, if we go into what I think of as a subject of experience, that's me, if I look deeply into who am I, what is it to have experience, I find that I too am not really separate from the object, that subject and object are two abstractions. They don't really make sense. So that's another way in which I think at least one interpretation of modern physics, quantum physics, and Buddhism they seem to be from different poles, arriving at the notion that truth is beyond the duality of subject and object, whatever that means. Yeah. Let's have one more.
So we have a question from Adriana.
Hello, Adriana.
Do you think that it's maybe more important to live with qualities such as receptivity or compassion rather than dwelling too much in enlightenment? And are these qualities sort of an enlightenment glow in imperfect human beings?
So there's two questions there, isn't there? Let's take them first. So is it better to focus on the qualities like receptivity and compassion rather than dwelling too much on what enlightenment is? And what was the second part?
So in these qualities, are they a kind of enlightenment glow in imperfect human beings?
And these qualities, are they a sort of glow of enlightenment in our imperfect selves? That's an interesting way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the beginning, I think a lot of Buddhists even don't think about enlightenment too much. And, it is a sort of strange thing to sit and think about. We do, in fact, imagine the Buddha when we do devotional practices, and in fact, a lot, we teach in a shrine room which has an image of the Buddha. So in a way, we're all the time in sort of imbuing what we do with an ideal of enlightenment, which you could say is not quite. It's not thinking about enlightenment. It's not sitting down thinking about it. There is a place for that as well. But even when you do that, you're thinking about it within an image of the Buddha. You're thinking with your imagination. So yes, we do that. We do have those practices. When you say lead with receptivity and compassion, well, I imagine they're like they go along with the image of enlightenment, don't they? Those qualities, they are part and parcel of it. You cannot have. You can't really have compassion without also imagining something beyond yourself, and you can't really be receptive without really imagining that your being is capable of receiving something that's beyond itself. So, in a way, you could unpack it from either end. You could, but ultimately there is always a vision. If you're practicing Buddhism, even if you're just sort of meditating with an image of the Buddha, you are subtly developing a sense of the awakened mind.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I'd also say that remember that enlightenment was the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah, so we might work on our greed and hatred through qualities like kindness, like love, like metta, generosity, empathy. And that's really good, but we also have to work on the delusion aspect. There's no enlightenment possible without wisdom. So we do have to, in a way, use our reason to think about what is it that's going on? in my ordinary moment-to-moment experience, what is going on? What, for example, is going on when I have a perception of something? When I see something, what's really going on? What's out there? Is it what I see, or am I interpreting what I see? What happens when I have a thought? What is a thought? We get so tied up in the content of our thoughts, we seldom pause to look at what is a thought. What's happening when we have a thought? Those questions are fundamental to dispelling the delusion that underlies, in a way, all of our greed and our hatred. So wisdom is an essential aspect of enlightenment. Without wisdom, there isn't really true compassion. You can go the other way around as well and say without compassion, there's no true wisdom. They go together, they're twins. Yeah. And so the talk we had, and what Satyadasa was pointing to, was, in a way, the wisdom that we need to develop. But it's not just a dry, thought-through academic wisdom. It's the wisdom of the heart. It's the wisdom of the imagination. It's the wisdom that also includes faith, of Shraddha, an intimation that there's something more. That's what we have to follow. Yeah. Okay, I think we're gonna probably pause there. Sorry if we didn't get to answer your questions. Thank you for those of you who did ask questions. Great questions, by the way, really, really good. And I hope we get a chance to, in a way, carry on exploring this sort of thing. So I want to just finish with a couple of things. So first of all, if you haven't already booked on our summer retreat, then do book on our summer retreat. It's from the 2nd of August to the 9th of August. It's led by Surya Gupta, Maitreya Bandhu, Surya Gupta, Maitreya Bandhu, Subhadramati, Gauravavati, and myself. I think it'll be a cracking week from the 2nd to the 9th of August. Now, it's free. You can come for free to everything, but you do need to register so that we can include you on, I don't know, all the Zoom stuff and the chat rooms and emails and various things. There'll be Dharma teachings every day. There'll be pujas. It's going to be a really good thing. And if you can take time off work, if you are working, and you can take time off, you'll get the most from the retreat, because there's going to be something happening throughout the day, from early morning till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So I hope that you'll be able to book on that. It'd be great if lots of us can be on retreat together. And secondly, I want to say many of you have been very, very generous with your money and giving to the LBC. We've been making regular daily announcements saying, please give. And so many of you have been responding. It's for me, that's very, well, it's moving, and also it makes me feel connected, and it makes us realize that actually we need the LBC, particularly when I'm teaching and I'm teaching to a camera. Sometimes I don't know what's happening on the other side of the camera, if you sort of mean. And so many of you have been showing your appreciation by giving. And I just want to reassure you that the money is really well spent, and the money is needed. The money is going to be well spent in that it keeps us going. And I do believe that we're doing really important work. And it's really needed. It's really needed at a time when many of our sources of income have dried up. Not all of our sources of income, but we're more reliant upon your generosity than at any other time. And yeah, we've been saying recently that compared to our normal income, we're losing about £10,000 a month at the moment. And we can just about, we're not about to immediately go bankrupt, but we can't sustain that sort of thing for forever either. The LBC still needs to run, even though we don't pay our teachers and things. So Satyadasa and myself, we're not, it's run on a voluntary basis, but we've still got expenses, buildings and various things, even the online equipment that we've had to purchase to do this sort of teaching. So if you can give, please do. And yeah, there'll be a thing in the chat box. So let's finish with the transference of merit and self-surrender, which we always do. We're trying to remember that we're practicing the Dharma for the benefit of the world, and that includes ourselves, but not just ourselves. So in call and response, the transference of merit and self-surrender. May the merit gained.
May the merit gained
In my acting thus.
in my acting thus
Go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
My personality throughout my existences.
My personality throughout my existences.
My possessions.
My possessions.
And my merit in all three ways.
And my merit in all three ways.
I give up without regard to myself.
I give up without regard to myself.
For the benefit of all beings.
For the benefit of all beings.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Are serviceable in many ways.
Are serviceable in many ways.
To the infinite number of beings.
To the infinite number of beings.
Inhabiting limitless space.
Inhabiting limitless space.
So may I become.
So may I become.
That which maintains all beings.
That which maintains all beings.
Situated throughout space.
Situated throughout space.
So long as all have not attained.
So long as all have not attained.
To peace.
To peace.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Satyadasa, for a wonderful talk. And hopefully see you very soon. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.